What if the fate of entire empires truly hinged on a single spear thrust? This story recounts the moment an ordinary weapon became legend, and its incredible journey through centuries, shaping history and inspiring the greatest rulers. Prepare to delve into a world of ancient mysteries where reality intertwines with myth, and every artifact holds untold stories that could change your perception of the past. The night on Golgotha, in 33 AD, was filled with an ominous storm. The sky, heavy with dark clouds, seemed to tremble under the weight of recent events. The hill, known as the Place of the Skull, was strewn with the grim remnants of that day's brutal spectacle. 3 crosses rose against the battered horizon, their wooden beams soaked in blood and rain, bearing witness to unimaginable suffering. The air was thick with the scent of iron and dust, and the crowd's whispers had faded into an unsettling silence, as if the earth itself held its breath, awaiting what would come next. Among the Roman soldiers tasked with guarding the crucifixion site stood a centurion named Longinus, his armor damp with rain, his hand restlessly clutching the shaft of a spear. He had seen death countless times, but something about the figure on the central cross disturbed him to his core. The man did not curse his tormentors nor beg for mercy. Instead, his words were quiet, his gaze piercing in its unwavering calm. Then, as thunder roared and lightning tore across the sky, the world seemed to pause. Longinus was given the order to complete what had begun. He stepped forward, his boots sinking into the sodden ground, and with a sharp, decisive thrust, plunged the spearhead into the side of the crucified man. The very moment the spear's point pierced the flesh, blood and water gushed from the wound, glinting ominously in the storm's dim light. A cold shiver ran through the assembled crowd. Some gasped, gripped by horror. Others fell to their knees, while still others fled in panic, convinced they had witnessed something immeasurably greater than a mere soldier's strike. This spear, an ordinary-looking piece of iron that had until then been merely an instrument of execution, would never again be just a weapon. From that moment, legends began to entwine around it, like ivy clinging to an ancient stone. It was said that the spear had absorbed the last essence of Christ, that it contained a spark of both unbearable suffering and divine power. Those who touched it claimed to feel its invisible pull, as if history itself bowed before it, acknowledging its special role in creation. Modern historians and medical experts, analyzing biblical texts, often discuss the phenomenon of blood and water, suggesting it could have been the result of a ruptured pericardium or pleural effusion, which only adds to the mystery of this legendary event, at the intersection of medicine and miracle. The storm intensified, furiously whipping the soldiers' cloaks and ancient banners, as if the heavens themselves expressed their wrath. It was recounted that the veil of the temple in Jerusalem, a grand tapestry separating the holy from the Holy of Holies, tore in two at that very instant, an event perceived as a powerful sign of old boundaries breaking and a harbinger of a new era. In the minds of those who witnessed these upheavals, the spear was marked not only as an instrument of final death, but also as a relic of cosmic significance, carrying echoes of divine providence. Even then, on that tumultuous evening, rumors began to spread that whoever possessed this spear could not be defeated, that kingdoms could rise and fall depending on its owner. These early traditions laid the foundation for future imperial ambitions and beliefs, where real power often intertwined with mystical force borrowed from sacred stories, shaping notions of invincibility and divine favor. When the body was removed from the cross, the spear remained with the legionaries. For them, it represented military spoils, a curiosity to be taken back to the heart of the empire, perhaps as proof of orders fulfilled or a souvenir from a distant province. Among the secret followers of the man they called Christ, however, the memory of that thrust carried a completely different, far deeper weight. They spoke of it in whispers, with reverence and fear, as if uttering its name aloud could summon both miracle and curse. Historical records of the Roman Empire, while not containing detailed descriptions of such artifacts, attest to meticulous record-keeping and strict discipline, which makes the absence of specific mentions of the spear even more enigmatic, and highlights its transition from the mundane to the sacred, where it acquired its true, legendary significance. Years would pass before the spear's story would take on clearer contours in manuscripts and scrolls, passed down through generations. Early chroniclers, such as Eusebius of Caesarea, 4th century, though not detailing the spear's history, laid the groundwork for recording ecclesiastical traditions in which such artifacts played a significant role. They debated its true meaning. Was it merely a random act of Roman soldier brutality, or did the hand of fate guide Longinus to pierce the Savior's side to fulfill ancient prophecies? Over time, the soldier himself, Longinus, became part of the legend. Some claimed he was blinded and then regained his sight upon touching Christ's blood, becoming the first witness to a miracle. Others whispered that he converted, preserving the memory of the spear until his death, and was canonized as Saint Longinus. What is certain is this: the relic did not vanish into obscurity. Instead, it passed from hand to hand, carrying with it the shadow of destiny, as described in later European chronicles associated with the history of the Holy Roman Empire. In the treasuries of Rome, at the courts of emperors, in the whispered prayers of monks, the spear began to take on a life beyond its metal, becoming the spear of destiny, believed to choose rulers, overthrow tyrants, and shape the very course of history. Legends link it to figures like Constantine the Great, Charlemagne, and even Adolf Hitler, who allegedly possessed or sought to possess it, believing in its mystical power. But on that night, as the storm raged, none of this had yet been written, and the future pages of history remained blank. There was only the soldier, the spear, and the unsettling silence of the hill, awaiting dawn to reveal its secrets. Lightning split the sky one last time, illuminating the weapon in Longinus's hand. For a moment, it glowed as if the iron itself had caught celestial fire, before darkness returned, engulfing it. And it was in this darkness, in this profound silence after the storm, that the legend began to breathe, born from a moment of pain and transformation. The storm slowly subsided, its fury replaced by a softer, soothing rain, washing the earth and cleansing the traces of the day. The crowd dispersed, their footsteps muffled by the wet ground, carrying away fear and confusion. The execution hill remained in an uneasy silence, broken only by the steady drip of rain on stone, as if nature mourned what had transpired. Above, through breaks in the clouds, a sliver of moonlight appeared, silvering the spear shaft as it rested in the soldier's hand. No one yet knew the true weight of what he carried, the incredible power and destiny contained within that simple object. And so, In the stillness after the thunder, a relic was born, not merely of iron and wood, but of history and symbol. A relic destined to pass through centuries, shrouded in mystery, feared by some, sought by others, but never at rest, always in motion, always at the center of great events. The rain softened further, as if the earth itself sighed after its grief, releasing the tension. Shadows stretched, and voices hushed, leaving only the whisper of the wind that carried the memory of the thrust. Descending the slopes of Golgotha like a secret carried into sleep. Meanwhile, beneath the streets of Rome, in the labyrinthine corridors of the catacombs, where light dared not penetrate, the faithful gathered. Oil lamps flickered on the roughly carved walls, their faint glow casting dancing halos over faded frescoes depicting bread, fish, and shepherds, symbols of a new faith. The air was damp, carrying the scent of stone and mold, mixed with the faint waxy smoke of the few candles. It was here, in this silence and seclusion of the catacombs, that whispers of the spear began to pass from mouth to mouth, like a fragile flame kept alive in the darkness, becoming part of an oral tradition that would preserve this story for future generations. These early Christian communities, living under persecution, laid the groundwork for preserving not only sacred texts, but also traditions of relics that would become cornerstones of their faith and history. In the depths of these hidden refuges, Christians found sanctuary, their existence constantly overshadowed by an unseen yet palpable threat. Open confession of faith, a simple prayer, carried mortal danger, promising chains, arenas, and inevitable death. Yet the tradition of the crucified Christ, like invisible roots, had grown too deep in human hearts to be stifled, and with it, the story of the spear that pierced his side was passed down. This weapon was spoken of not with triumphant jubilation, but with profound reverence, as if its memory was a precious relic, containing both the sorrow of loss and a great promise. Among the believers, opinions varied. Some asserted that the spear carried a curse, for it had been the instrument of the final mortal wound. Others, their voices softer and more penetrating, insisted that it was consecrated, for it had absorbed the blood and water that flowed from the Savior's wound. In these close, hushed circles of discussion, an ordinary iron weapon acquired a much greater significance. It transformed into a multifaceted symbol, an inexplicable paradox, and a profound mystery. One story, carefully preserved in these subterranean chambers, recounted Longinus himself. This Roman soldier, as passed down by word of mouth, was struck by sudden blindness during the storm on Golgotha, which many perceived as punishment for his cruelty. But when Christ's blood touched his eyes, his sight miraculously returned. It was whispered that afterward he repented, left his legion, and spent the rest of his days in obscurity, carrying in his heart the faith that was born at the moment of his spear's thrust. Whether this story was true or merely a legend, it undoubtedly offered comfort to those who lived in constant fear of Rome's sword. It brought hope. Even the hand that dealt the mortal wound could be forgiven. The relic itself, as traditions claimed, moved stealthily in the following decades, like a ghost. Some asserted it remained in Jerusalem, carefully hidden by Christ's first followers. Others recounted it was transported to Antioch and concealed in a reliquary beneath the altar of a modest church. Still others whispered it was already in the heart of Rome itself, lurking in the private collections of influential senators who, despite prohibitions, were fascinated by Christian artifacts and collected them in secret. The catacombs became true echo chambers for speculation and conjecture. Each gathering brought new variations of the legend, some full of hope, others ominous. A woman with silver strands in her hair shared her visions, claiming the spear would one day be raised by kings, and its possessor would be invincible in battle. A haggard man, conversely, warned that such power was dangerous, and perhaps it would be better if the spear were lost forever, buried where no human hand could ever obtain it. And all this time, the flickering lamps illuminated their faces from the shadows and flames, creating the impression that the very stone walls listened intently to every word. Beyond the whispers of faith, the spear subtly but surely began to intertwine with the world of politics. Roman officials, curious about this new sect that despite all persecutions refused to disappear, began to pay attention to these stories. Some scoffed, others felt fear, but a few began to wonder if this weapon truly possessed such power. Could it be used for the good or ill of the empire? Thus, the legend spread in two directions. Among the persecuted faithful, it served as a symbol of hope, among the powerful, as a seed of ambition. Centuries later, chroniclers would hotly debate the true whereabouts of this relic during those fragile times. The truth is veiled in silence, for the earliest keepers left no written records save oral tradition. But what is certain is that the memory of the spear endured, carried like a smoldering ember through generations of believers who prayed in the shadows. In the catacombs, this whisper both comforted and troubled. It comforted the weary faithful with visions of divine justice, but also warned of the heavy burden such a relic carried. Perhaps it was never meant for mortal hands. Perhaps its story was a parable, not a possession to be held. However, the human heart is rarely content with parables alone. Somewhere in the silence, there is always one who will ask, "Where is it now?" This question stirred every hidden chamber, penetrating even the dreams of the faithful. And so the legend grew, remaining invisible yet unforgettable, much as the flicker of a candle's light brightens in the surrounding darkness, until even the silence itself began to breathe with anticipation. As the lamps burned down, shadows stretched and stilled. The faithful quietly dispersed into the night, leaving behind only the faint scent of wax and a soft echo of whispered prayers. In that ensuing silence, the whisper of the spear lingered, imprinted on the stone, like secrets too heavy to be erased. Dawn broke over Constantinople, illuminating the gleaming domes and marble walls that caught the sun's first rays. The empire was undergoing changes, its center of gravity steadily shifting eastward, and with this, a thirst for symbols awakened, for objects capable of linking heaven to the throne, for relics that could crown earthly power with divine legitimacy. It was in this new order, under the reign of Constantine the Great, that the spear's story began to weave into the fabric of imperial destiny. Constantine was a man of visions. On the eve of a decisive battle, it was recounted, he saw a sign in the sky, a shining cross, accompanied by words promising victory under its symbol. Inspired by this revelation, he ordered his soldiers to march into battle under banners emblazoned with the Chi monogram. Against all odds, he achieved a brilliant victory at the Battle of the Milvian Bridge. To his enemies, it was mere luck. To his followers, it was undeniable divine proof. To Constantine himself, it was an unmistakable calling. In the years that followed, as he consolidated his power and reformed the empire, Constantine sought to collect Christian relics, seeing in this both acts of piety and instruments for solidifying his authority. Among them, it was whispered, was the weapon already marked by fate, the very spear that had pierced the side of the crucified Christ. If such a relic could be in the hands of the emperor, what doubts could remain about heaven's favor on his rule? Historical chroniclers later asserted that sacred fragments of the spear were found in Emperor Constantine's possession. Some suggested the relic had been presented to him by bishops eager to solidify the ties of their faith with the imperial crown. Other versions claimed this ancient weapon had made a mysterious journey from sacred Jerusalem to ancient Antioch, and then into the very heart of the vast empire, transported in deep secrecy until it appeared at his court. Regardless of the authenticity of these conflicting accounts, a key idea firmly took root in people's minds. The emperor wielded not only the colossal power of Rome, but also, as believed, the very relic of destiny, capable of influencing the course of history. In the shining halls of Constantinople, the spear was no longer a simple tool of a Roman legionary, but had transformed into a revered object, lavishly adorned with gold and sparkling precious stones, now resting in exquisite reliquaries, where clouds of incense created a mystical atmosphere. It was displayed not as an instrument of destruction and violence, but as undeniable evidence of divine approval and patronage. Touching it was believed to be akin to touching the finest thread connecting heavenly spheres to the earthly world. However, as is often the case, even the greatest power invariably casts its dark shadow. Legends spread throughout cities and villages that the relic could bring not only blessings, but also curses, and that rulers who dared to claim possession of it found their reigns marked by both brilliant triumphs and bitter tragedies. Even Constantine himself, a great conqueror and revered by some as a saint, was afflicted by severe ailments towards the end of his life. Ancient superstitions were intricately intertwined with historical facts. Were his sufferings the exorbitant price for possessing an artifact whose power surpassed the capabilities of mere mortal hands? Nevertheless, despite the ominous portents, the spear's mystical aura only intensified. Over the subsequent centuries, Byzantine emperors carefully preserved it as an integral part of their sacred arsenal, displaying it on solemn holidays and during majestic processions. It served as a silent yet powerful reminder that the empire's grandeur rested not only on the strength of marble or the fortitude of steel, but also on sacred relics, inextricably linking them to the divine narrative of Christ. Thus, the spear transformed into an essential part of the symbolic language of power, a relic invoked during solemn coronations and bloody wars. Its presence was perceived simultaneously as a great blessing and a heavy burden, and the common people also carefully preserved its story in the depths of their hearts. Pilgrims who had the chance to behold the artifact spoke of the profound reverence that stayed with them for years. They returned to their native villages, carrying amazing tales of the relic, which, they claimed, glowed like fire in the flickering candlelight. Its aura, they asserted, was heavy as a mountain, and its silence sounded louder than thunder itself. For these people, the spear represented more than just an imperial treasure. It served as irrefutable proof that the sacred history of the heavens still touched the mortal earth. Thus, the Spear of Destiny definitively entered the life of the empire, its image woven into magnificent mosaics of saints, its glory sung in solemn chants beneath majestic vaulted domes, and the artifact itself carefully preserved in luxurious marble and gold chambers. It ceased to be a simple weapon of Centurion Longinus. It transformed into a personal relic of the emperor, a true jewel in Byzantium's crown, a coveted prize that would attract the gaze of kings and conquerors for many centuries to come. However, as is known, relics are restless entities. They cannot be kept under lock and key forever. Power clings to them, like a shadow relentlessly following a flame, irresistibly drawing the attention of all who crave boundless dominion. The spear, born in the whirlwind of a storm and stained with blood, was only beginning its centuries-long and winding path. Future crusades awaited it, unbreakable vows and bitter betrayals. Knights in white cloaks, sworn to secrecy, those who would one day declare it their sacred trust, awaited it. The city came alive with the sun's first rays as morning bells rang out over majestic Constantinople. Streets filled with bustling merchants and pious pilgrims, valiant soldiers and humble priests. But deep within the palace walls, in a chamber whose air was saturated with the scent of incense, the sacred relic rested, awaiting its hour, silent, patient, as if observing the course of events. For true relics never sleep. They stoically endure the trials of time, awaiting the next hand to claim them, the next chapter of history to be written in their name. The bells gradually faded, dissolving into a barely audible echo, and the golden light of a new day softly spread, bringing with it a sense of deep peace. In this tranquil silence, the relic glimmered almost imperceptibly beneath its precious casing, as if holding within it not only echoes of past eras, but also the invisible pulse of future prophecies. The path to sacred Jerusalem appeared as an endless ribbon of dust and spilled blood, stretching through harsh mountains, boundless plains, and scorching deserts, traversed by men consumed by deep faith, relentless ambition, and an ardent desire for absolution. It was 1096 when the first great crusade was solemnly proclaimed. From countless villages and towns across Europe, thousands set out under the consecrated banner of the cross, their standards proudly unfurled in the wind, and their armor clanged melodically in time with their weary but determined steps. Some walked barefoot, deeply convinced that every wound on their tormented body was a silent prayer. Others, knights clad in armor, marched with the proud bearing of noble houses. Their swords were sharply honed, and their eyes burned with a flame, illuminated by visions of paradise promised to all who would participate in the liberation of the holy city. However, amidst the incessant whispers of pilgrims and warriors, another story accompanied them, quieter yet incomparably more powerful than any fiery sermon. Popular rumor asserted that anyone who went into battle carrying the Spear of Destiny would be invincible, that the iron point, which once pierced Christ's side, contained not only the bitterness of suffering, but also the promise of unwavering victory. For those who trudged towards inevitable death, such a story held a truly irresistible allure. The Crusader warriors carried with them various relics, splinters of wood, purportedly from the true cross, and bones of saints, carefully hidden in exquisite reliquaries, and vials of dust, allegedly brought from the Holy Land. Yet nothing ignited their imagination as strongly as the legends of the spear. If Emperor Constantine had once possessed its sacred fragments, if Byzantium itself had guarded it for decades in its majestic palaces, could it not reappear to guide their steps to certain triumph? And so, on long nights by flickering campfires, when the eerie howl of jackals echoed from beyond the desert dunes, the ancient story was retold again and again, passed from mouth to mouth. Some swore that the sacred spear still rested in Constantinople, zealously guarded by its emperors. Others claimed it was securely hidden in Jerusalem itself, awaiting discovery by the truly faithful. Only a few whispered of Antioch, a city where ancient churches crumbled into dust, and every stone seemed to conceal the secrets of long-forgotten relics. The Crusade, this grand and arduous undertaking, was universally marked by relentless hunger, devastating diseases, and sudden, deadly ambushes. The paths along which the armies moved were literally strewn with the bodies of the fallen, whose pilgrimage tragically ended either from utter exhaustion or from the merciless blow of a sword. And yet, despite all these unbearable trials and irreparable losses, the image of the spear seemed invisibly present beside them, serving as a kind of guiding star. It transformed not merely into a material artifact, but into a powerful, all-encompassing promise. If they endured long enough, if they did not break under the weight of adversity, this heavenly relic would surely appear to give supreme meaning to their incredible sufferings and deeds. Returning to their families, knights sent messages home, detailing battles where the tide of the fight seemed to turn at the most critical moment, when ordinary logic and strategy could no longer explain such a sudden shift. These triumphs, exceeding conventional tactical calculations, were attributed in the depths of their souls to the invisible presence of the spear. Priests accompanying the military formations actively supported and strengthened this belief, tirelessly preaching that God's grace rested on those who marched under the patronage of holy relics, whether visible or hidden. Every success achieved became a powerful fuel for their faith, while every loss incurred was explained as a consequence of sinfulness, which only spurred them to seek the coveted relic even more fervently and zealously. As the Crusaders approached the ancient walls of Antioch, utterly exhausted and suffering from unbearable hunger, the legend of the spear gained new, even greater power. For Antioch, according to numerous accounts, was revered as a true city treasury of relics, a sacred place where apostles themselves once walked and offered prayers. If the Holy Spear existed anywhere, it was undoubtedly here. The promise of its discovery instilled enough courage in the tired, suffering people to once again raise their tattered banners and continue the fight. However, in this cherished hope lay an ominous shadow. For the spear had never been an ordinary relic, a simple cult object. It represented a force, unbridled, untamed, and extremely dangerous. And where such power concentrates, intrigues, suspicions, and the shadow of treachery inevitably arise. Among the high-ranking leaders of the Crusade, those who commanded the army, a hidden rivalry began to emerge, an unspoken struggle for future privileges. Whoever managed to gain possession of the Holy Spear, if it were found in the depths of Antioch, could claim not only divine patronage and unbreakable protection, but also undisputed supremacy, the very leadership over the entire army. Thus, this relic, not yet found and remaining invisible, was already scattering the seeds of discord and strife. Even before its physical discovery, it governed thoughts, ignited ambitious aspirations, and deepened cracks in relationships between people who, in theory, were united by a common oath under the banner of the cross. Thus, the march to Jerusalem was not merely the movement of military formations through hostile lands. It was a true journey, imbued with myths and deep beliefs. Step by step, mile by mile, every drop of blood shed on the arduous path was, in their imagination, filled with sacred meaning thanks to the invisible aura of holy relics. And among all these revered objects, nothing held greater significance than the spear, that sharp steel blade which on the one hand promised triumph to its possessor, but on the other, invariably held within it the echoes of death on Golgotha. As the Crusaders huddled closer in their cloaks, seeking refuge from the biting cold of the desert night, the flames of their campfires slowly died down, turning into flickering embers. Their marching songs hushed, giving way to quiet prayers, and their eyelids closed from extreme exhaustion. But even in sleep, many of them continued to dream of this great weapon, shining in the reflections of candles raised high above armies, whose shadow stretched far across battlefields where, they imagined, no defeat could ever reach them. The night air had cooled to its limit, the sands stilled in silence. A gentle breeze swept over their tents and banners, carrying portents of destiny eastward, towards unconquered strongholds and unobtained holy sites. It was 1119, and mighty Jerusalem had fallen. The holy city, for long decades an unfulfilled dream, was now under Crusader control. Yet the roads leading to it remained fraught with dangers, swarming with brigands, treacherous thieves, and under the unseen presence of competing powers. Nevertheless, pilgrims arrived in endless streams, barefoot and trembling, eagerly wishing to behold the places where Christ himself had once walked. Too often their journey was cut short, never reaching its cherished goal. The boundless deserts and steep mountain passes claimed their lives, not only from unbearable thirst, but also from the merciless sword. It was in this atmosphere of constant threat that 9 valiant knights appeared before the King of Jerusalem with a solemn vow. They pledged to renounce worldly riches and personal glory, dedicating their lives solely to the protection of pilgrims and the preservation of priceless holy relics. They donned humble garments, their swords serving not for expansion and conquest, but solely for defense, and they bound themselves by an oath that would echo through centuries. These were the poor fellow soldiers of Christ and of the Temple of Solomon, very soon to be known simply as the Knights Templar. By day they rode the roads, their shields emblazoned with a red cross, escorting the faithful from city to sanctuary. By night, they resided within the Temple Mount itself. Their dwellings, as tradition claimed, were built upon ancient foundations, those very foundations that gave rise to whispers of secrets hidden deep beneath the earth, beneath layers of stone. For the Temple Mount was much more than just a fortress. It was the place where Solomon's temple once majestically stood, and where, according to numerous rumors, countless treasures and priceless relics lay buried in dust and oblivion. The primary oath of the Templars was strict and unwavering, prescribing them poverty, chastity, and absolute obedience. However, there was another, more sacred oath, uttered less publicly, preserved more in deep silence than in spoken words. It was a vow to guard what the world was not yet ready to comprehend, for holy relics held incredible power, and such power was always dangerous. In the subdued light of their chapels, illuminated only by the flickering wicks of oil lamps, the knights bowed their heads in reverence over sacred reliquaries, swearing that anything that came into their hands would not be squandered, would not be an object of vain boasting, but would be hidden from prying eyes, carefully preserved and vigilantly protected. It was in these early, formative years of the Order that the legend of the Holy Spear became inextricably linked with the Templars' destiny. Some claimed that fragments of the sacred artifact had long since fallen into their hands. Others insisted that the knights tirelessly sought it, searching ancient vaults, excavating beneath ruins, and collecting scraps of information brought to the East in the form of rumors and old scrolls. Whatever the truth, the Templars became firmly rooted in the perception of the Christian world as guardians of relics that were too powerful for crowned heads and too sacred for the gaze of ordinary mortals. Initially, the Church viewed this new order with noticeable distrust. Knights who prayed like monks, and monks who fought with the valor of warriors, represented an unprecedented phenomenon. However, their fame soon grew, and their reputation strengthened. Their strict discipline and aura of mystery generated both deep reverence and some apprehension among lay people and clergy. Pilgrims spoke of them as heavenly warriors with swords, and rulers saw them as men who served not earthly monarchs, but the Almighty. And in every hall where secret conversations took place, the same question invariably arose, lingering in the air: what secrets did they guard within the temple? Some traditions whispered of gold of incredible magnitude, of treasures capable of dazzling the mind. Others claimed that it was about ancient scrolls from the time of wise Solomon, containing profound knowledge long lost to humanity. However, only a few, in barely audible whispers, dared to ask, might the sacred spear itself be hidden within their depths, carefully guarded from prying eyes until the appointed hour, protected by vows stronger than steel chains? The Knights Templar themselves never offered confirmation or denial. Their unwavering silence only multiplied the enigma, enhancing the mystical aura around the order. And perhaps this was their profound wisdom. For such a relic as the spear possessed the power to enthrone or depose mighty rulers, to ignite the fighting spirit in legions, or to condemn entire civilizations to destruction. It was much better for it to remain hidden deep within, shrouded in silence, guarded by oaths that bound souls with a loyalty impervious even to chains. In the deep nights, when cold desert winds howled around the massive walls of the temple precinct, the knights gathered in their secluded chapel. Their travel cloaks were neatly folded, and their battle swords laid aside. They knelt in neat rows on the cold stone floor, their prayers ascending in a rhythm that seemed older than any battle, quiet words echoing beneath the vaulted arches and between the massive columns. And always in their hearts lived a profound sense of stewardship, an understanding that they were not merely warriors of Christ, but vigilant guardians of an ancient mystery, something the world should not take lightly or disregard. As the night deepened, the candle wicks slowly burned down, casting shadows on the rough stone that stretched like ghostly, long fingers. And in this solemn silence, their oath gained its unshakable power. It was not inscribed on fragile parchment, nor carved in cold marble, but lived in their every breath and pulsed in their blood. It was an oath of guardianship, an oath of unbreakable secrecy, an oath of loyalty to the spear. The march to Antioch turned into a grueling trial of hunger for the Crusaders. By the winter of 1097, the warriors were utterly exhausted, their shoes tattered, and their stomachs painfully cramped with hunger. Yet they pushed forward relentlessly, driven by the sacred vision of Jerusalem and fueled by whispers of untold relics hidden within the ancient city. Antioch, once the ancient seat of the apostles, rose like a precious gem on the banks of the Orontes River. Its colossal walls inspired awe, and its towers bristled with countless defenders. Its capture seemed an impossible task, and retreat promised only the abyss of despair. The siege dragged on for long months. Men gnawed on leather belts, trying to assuage the pangs of hunger. Noble war horses, once the pride of the knights, were slaughtered for meat. Epidemics ruthlessly thinned their already depleted ranks, and desertion spread through the camp like a devastating plague. Yet even amidst these unbearable sufferings, hope clung to a single, slender thread. It was the possibility that higher powers would intervene, that the sacred relics of Christendom would be revealed to fortify the spirits of the faithful. It was in these days, filled with utter despair, that a monk named Peter Bartholomew appeared. He was a gaunt man, but with burning eyes, who declared he had been granted a vision. In his dream, St. Andrew had spoken to him, revealing a secret: the holy spear, which once pierced Christ's side, lay buried deep beneath the floor of St. Peter's Church in Antioch. His words spread through the exhausted camp with the speed of a wildfire. Was this merely the product of hunger-induced madness, or was it the divine answer they had so fervently prayed for? Doubt fiercely battled with faith in the hearts of the warriors. Some leaders openly scoffed, accusing Peter of deliberate deception. Others, too weary to afford the luxury of doubt, desperately clung to this hope. Finally, a small detachment entered the dilapidated church, tearing up the stone floor with pickaxes and even bare hands. Long hours passed, sweat mixing with the rising dust, until at last a triumphant cry rang out. From deep within the earth, a spearhead was retrieved, darkened by centuries. This discovery, like an electric shock, electrified the entire camp. Priests declared it a true miracle, irrefutable proof that heaven had blessed their crusade. Warriors openly wept, deeply convinced that the tide of the war had dramatically turned. The relic was solemnly carried through the ranks in a majestic procession. Torches blazed brightly, and solemn chants ascended to the night sky. People who just hours earlier had been in deep despair now knelt in the mud, convinced they had touched the very edge of destiny. And indeed, a decisive victory followed. Emboldened by newfound strength, the Crusaders surged to assault the city, capturing Antioch against all odds and adverse circumstances. For them, it was irrefutable proof. The spear had granted them triumph, as prophesied. From that moment on, its presence invariably influenced every campaign and every battle. Yet even in triumph, seeds of doubt remained. Some whispered that Peter's vision was merely a clever deception, and the discovered spear was nothing more than an old weapon, planted in a moment of deep despair. A profound disagreement arose among the leaders of the crusade. Was it a genuine relic, or merely a cleverly crafted symbol designed to sustain faith? But symbols possess colossal power, often surpassing the power of truth itself. For the people who carried it, faith alone was quite sufficient. The relic was carefully guarded with reverence, wrapped in precious cloth, and carried into battle as a sacred banner of hope. And wherever it went, morale soared like a raging flame. However, a deeper question remained unanswered. Was it the true spear, or one of the many fragments scattered throughout the centuries? The true truth, perhaps, will forever remain hidden from the world, and perhaps it is in this uncertainty that its greatest power lay. The existence of an invisible relic can be doubted, but a tangible relic, held in trembling hands, cannot be ignored. For the powerful order of the Templars, which rose in the subsequent decades, the narrative of Antioch became closely intertwined with their own, shrouded in mystery, history. It was rumored that they themselves sought the true spear, perhaps far beyond Antioch, in unknown lands where the Crusades never reached. Whether they ever touched it remains a mystery. But the history of Antioch proved one thing undeniably. Relics can move entire armies, transform despair into triumph, and change the very destiny of nations. After the city found relative peace under Crusader rule, which was far from serene, the Holy Spear found its place in one of the local churches. There, it was illuminated by flickering candles, and pilgrims flocked to it, filled with reverence. However, even in the pious silence of the night hours, questions continued to linger in many minds. Was this truly the same spearhead that once pierced Christ's side? Or did ordinary steel lie before them, possessing immense power only due to the unrestrained, desperate faith of ordinary mortals? In the Antiochene chapels, lamps cast a dim light. Their flames wavered precariously, almost dying out from the gusts of the biting winter wind. Long, shifting shadows stretched across the rough stone floor, precisely where the spear had once been found, as if the earth itself held in its memory the touch of trembling hands that had brought it to light. Beyond the walls, the Orontes River carried its dark and silent waters, taking the secret far away, as if aware that the true journey of this sacred relic was only just beginning. Far from the bustle of Antioch and the fading echoes of military victory, the true story of this relic delved deeper into the shrouds of mystery. For not all treasures were destined for lavish processions or open public veneration. Some were destined to disappear into the shadows, where only a narrow circle of the chosen few could bear the burden of their keeping. For the Knights Templar, whose fame resounded throughout the Christian world, this spear became more than just a legend passed by word of mouth. It became a sacred trust, whispered about within the dim stone walls of their monasteries. Their commanderies, like silent islands, rose across the vast territory of Europe and in the sacred land of the Middle East. These were fortresses built of pale limestone, with severe, impregnable walls and austere, unadorned chapels. They held something far more significant than mere swords and shields. Beneath the vaulted ceilings of the monasteries, where slow prayers echoed, and beneath the chapels lit only by solitary candles, secret crypts were carved deep into the earth. It was there that reliquaries were placed, artfully crafted from gold, silver, or sometimes from simple, humble wood. For even the most inconspicuous casket could guard the greatest of sacred treasures. In one such commandery, it was claimed, lay a hidden reliquary, wrapped in fine silk and resting on an altar that no ordinary pilgrim's foot ever touched. The chapel situated above this hidden chamber appeared exceedingly modest. Its walls were devoid of any ornamentation, and the crucifix was utterly simple. Yet those few who were permitted to descend the narrow hidden staircase spoke of something shimmering in the dim light. A shard of iron, blackened by centuries, skillfully set in gold and clear crystal. Some swore it was a genuine fragment of the very spear, while others persistently insisted it was merely one of the numerous copies that had appeared and multiplied over the centuries. But for the Knights Templar, the question of the relic's authenticity was secondary to their sacred oath of guardianship. Their order was called not to display such holy objects, but to carefully preserve them, protecting them from greedy ambitions and worldly corruption. For monarchs, relics served as symbols of dominion, for the Church, as signs of its unquestionable authority. But for the Templars, they represented a heavy burden, an overwhelming responsibility, inextricably linked with secrecy and self-sacrifice. The less the world knew of these treasures, the safer they remained. That is why the existence of this hidden chapel was never spoken aloud. Its presence was categorically denied, even when vague rumors seeped through the cracks in the historical fabric. Chroniclers, who centuries later would diligently search for traces of the past, sometimes stumbled upon barely discernible clues: a brief note in the margin of an ancient manuscript, a schematic drawing hidden beneath layers of a palimpsest, or a fleeting but intriguing line in a monk's diary. And in the crypt, beneath the red cross, rests the iron of Golgotha. These details were too vague to serve as irrefutable proof, yet too persistent to simply ignore. One can only imagine the scene unfolding in that hidden chapel. The air there was likely cool and heavy, filled with the faint scent of limestone and beeswax. A solitary lamp burned before the reliquary, its flame flickering almost imperceptibly from the faint breath of unseen draughts. Two knights knelt in silence before the shrine, their heads bowed in deep reverence, their swords resting on the stone floor, bearing witness to silent devotion. No one spoke a word. Words were superfluous here. The relic needed no grand declarations or elaborate speeches. It demanded only presence. And that deep silence itself transformed into a heartfelt prayer. Perhaps the spear itself was never there. Perhaps what rested in that reliquary was merely the embodiment of faith itself, a symbol of humanity's deep, passionate need to believe in something. However, symbols can be sharper than any iron. They pierce the soul far deeper than the keenest weapon. And in this hidden Templar chapel, the power of faith was guarded with far greater ferocity and zeal than any royal crown. The outside world, meanwhile, buzzed with commerce and ambition. Pilgrims streamed continuously into port cities. Kings plotted intrigues at their courts. Popes issued decrees shaking the foundations of the world. But in this secret sanctuary, time seemed to stand still. The relic waited, untouched by the hustle and ambitions of kingdoms, patient and motionless like an ancient stone. The Knights Templar understood something that eluded most. Relics belong not just to fleeting history, they belong to eternity itself. Their sacred guardianship involved not only preserving the spear for one generation or 1 century, but also guarding it for all centuries to come. That is why the hidden chapel became not just a stone vault, but a kind of vessel of silence. A silence that continued long after the very men who guarded it had turned to dust. The lamp still flickers. The silence deepens. And in this unwavering stillness, the relic continues to wait. Whether it is true iron or a figment of imagination, truth or myth, it waits. For relics, like the deepest secrets, never truly disappear. They slumber in hidden chapels, in forgotten crypts, in the farthest reaches of memory, where only faint whispers of them remain. Far to the west, beyond the azure waters of the Mediterranean, the heart of Christendom continued to pulse with the rhythm of ancient rituals and unquestionable authority. The Vatican, that unyielding fortress of faith and colossal political power, gazed upon the world with a mixture of deep devotion and a certain age-old weariness. In the shaded, majestic halls of the Apostolic Palace, papal scribes and advisors exchanged quiet whispers, their quills scratching on parchment, as if the very ink exuded a certain fear, for some stories were too dangerous to be openly told, and among them, the tale of the spear held a special, prominent place. This legend slowly but steadily made its way through the centuries, passed down through the whispered memories of pilgrims, in the letters of crusader knights, and in the carefully guarded diaries of monks. By this time, spiritual leaders realized that relics were more than mere signs of divine presence. They had become powerful tools, capable of influencing the course of history. Monarchs passionately desired to possess them, and popes wielded them, asserting their authority. Meanwhile, somewhere beyond the reach of ecclesiastical hierarchies, the mysterious spear, shrouded in darkness, bound in iron, and believed to be imbued with fateful power, remained in the hands of people sworn to deep secrecy. Unease began to stir with the emergence of questions. Who truly owned this spear? Could it be used to challenge the authority of the Church? Was it already invisibly influencing rulers, subtly tipping the scales in wars, coronations, and acts of betrayal? Scholarly minds hotly debated whether this relic had ever left Jerusalem, while advisors urged extreme caution, emphasizing that knowledge of it alone could be a formidable weapon. To utter its name aloud would not only awaken passionate desire, but also invite mortal danger. In halls adorned with gold and frescoes depicting the faces of saints and martyrs, scribes diligently copied manuscripts, often using coding or adding hidden annotations. The margins of the manuscripts contained hints that the Templars possessed something extraordinary. However, these references were skillfully veiled in symbols that only those initiated into the secrets could decipher. Maps were created using secret marks, applied with invisible ink, intended to either guide or mislead the next seeker. The pontiffs themselves were not immune to the pervasive fear. Some of them asserted that the very existence of the spear posed a serious threat to the stability of all Christendom. If the Templars or any other mortal hand openly commanded it, what king or emperor could rise above obedience to Rome? One cardinal, pacing rhythmically across the marble floors, quietly stated that relics were as dangerous as any army, their power hidden, yet absolute. Another warned that the Church must always maintain plausible deniability, for to claim knowledge would be to declare oneself a target. However, there was also an irresistible temptation. If the Vatican could assert its ownership of the spear, or even fragments of it, it would become the ultimate symbol of divine favor. Popes envisioned solemn processions in which this sacred relic would appear, blessing armies, influencing kings, and affirming the unquestionable supremacy of the Church. But the risk of exposure was too great, and so the Vatican chose the path of strictest secrecy. It was better to feign ignorance than to invite disaster. Tension escalated as rumors of the Templars' growing influence reached Rome. Knights who had taken vows of obedience to the Church, yet operated independently in distant lands, brought back both treasures and unsettling news. The spear, it was said, was among them, hidden in crypts beneath austere chapels, its iron point reflecting candlelight in ways no outsider could see. To the Vatican, it was both a miracle and a threat, a relic that could inspire and a relic that could destabilize. In response, scribes quietly labored, cataloging manuscripts, encrypting knowledge, and ensuring that the spear's story would not be fully known to the wider world. References were artfully buried in allegories, passed down through generations with the certainty that only those trained in the Church's secret language could ever interpret them. And yet, even with these precautions, the unease persisted. Relics, after all, have a habit of appearing when least expected. Outside the palace, Rome continued its grandeur and daily routine. Bells rang from tall campaniles, markets buzzed with activity, and pilgrims knelt in basilicas beneath golden mosaics. Within the hidden rooms, however, the church held its breath, for they knew that the spear's story was more than just a legend. It was a living force, capable of shaping kings, armies, and history itself. And as long as it remained in secret hands, their unease would never fully subside. Candle flames flickered and dimmed, casting long shadows on walls adorned with the faces of saints. Scribes leaned closer to their parchments, aware that each stroke of ink was a thread in a fragile web. Outside, the city slept, but within the Vatican, fear quietly pulsed, like the heartbeat of a secret too powerful to be revealed. Far from the splendor of Rome and the turmoil of battlefields, monasteries rose in quiet corners of Christendom, their arches and columns forming a sanctuary for prayer, contemplation, and secrets. Here monks walked with measured steps, their robes rustling on stone floors, their eyes downcast in reverence, or perhaps in the meticulous calculation required to preserve knowledge that could overthrow kings. These monasteries were not merely houses of faith, but repositories of memory, where the spear's story passed through generations. In the dim candlelight, manuscripts were copied with meticulous care. Ink flowed like liquid shadow, inscribing letters that often concealed more than they revealed. The margins of the manuscripts contained enigmatic symbols, maps disguised as ornamental flourishes, and phrases in languages known only to the initiated. A curious eye might scan the text and see only scripture or doctrine. But those trained in the Church's secret patterns could discern a map of movement, a code pointing to relics hidden beyond casual inquiry. It was in these monastic abodes, steeped in profound silence, that the whisper of the inseparable link between the Templar order and the legendary spear first emerged. Monks, whose parchments carefully preserved every word, diligently recorded testimonies of journeys eastward, where, according to numerous rumors, individual fragments of this sacred weapon crossed boundless deserts and towering mountain ranges, finding temporary refuge in secluded monasteries located along the Great Silk Road. Every entry made was the result of a deliberate choice, every omission a conscious act. For knowledge represented immense power, but this power, when in the wrong hands, could lead to universal destruction. Some of the ancient manuscripts contained veiled allusions to Antioch, to majestic Constantinople, and to Holy Jerusalem. Yet this information was always presented in a disguised form, through complex allegories. The staff of the blessed, or the iron of the martyr, could denote either the same sacred relic or dozens of skillfully crafted copies, designed to mislead any incautious seeker. On the margins of the manuscripts, mysterious symbols danced, here a star, there a cross enclosed in a circle, so that the uninitiated saw only decorative elements, while the knowledgeable person unerringly understood the hidden instructions. Thus, the spear's story was silently passed down, remaining invisible to those who did not belong to the chosen circle. Monks also quietly whispered about their visions. One might dream of a distant mountain pass where, through swirling mist, a glint of iron catching the sunlight briefly appeared. Another would awaken, absolutely convinced of the existence of a map hidden beneath the floor of a monastic cell. Each such interpretation was carefully discussed in hushed voices and never directly recorded, lest valuable knowledge inadvertently escape. The ancient walls themselves seemed to hold the memory of centuries past. Stone absorbed secrets, and monasteries became as reliable guardians as any knight or impregnable crypt. However, the Roman Church did not fully trust even its own monks. The rise of the Templar order was swift and impressive. Their influence spread quietly but steadily throughout Christendom. Whenever a new commandery was founded, monasteries often followed, and with them, manuscripts, coded with keys to the resting place of the legendary spear. The Roman Curia observed this process with caution, well aware that secrecy alone was not enough to ensure complete control. Silence had to be maintained, but vigilance remained an indispensable condition. In these ancient corridors, the line between piety and duty gradually blurred. Monks offered prayers both for the salvation of Christ's soul and for the preservation of sacred knowledge. Every step they took, every flicker of a candle flame, was an integral part of the ritual of preservation. The spear's story possessed too much power to allow it to drift unsupervised, and was too significant to entrust to human memory alone. Each new generation of scribes and priests became a link in an unbroken chain, connecting past and future through whispers, ink, and eternal stone. On some nights, the monastic walls came alive, filled with shadows. Knights Templar arrived under the cloak of moonlight, exchanging silent gestures with monks in the dim corridors. The exchange of information was extremely delicate. A nod, a carefully folded parchment, an expressive glance conveying instructions too subtle for spoken words. The spear was never mentioned by name, but every gesture spoke of its presence more eloquently than any words. Its unseen presence, whether literal or symbolic, permeated the stone halls, and thus within these monasteries of silence, history moved quietly and invisibly. The relics journey eastward, the coded manuscripts, the allegories in the margins. All these threads converged here, in this sacred space. Outside, kingdoms waged wars, popes plotted intrigues, armies marched. Inside, history was carefully preserved, safe from conquests, from ambitions, and from human folly. At night, as the wind rustled against the monastery walls and lamps dimly flickered, the air seemed to hum with silent anticipation. The spear's journey paused for a moment, resting in deep secrecy, awaiting the next hand, the next chapter, the next whisper in the endless chain of guardianship. Beyond the familiar roads of Europe, beyond the fortified walls of Crusader cities, the world stretched wide and perilous. Boundless deserts lay like golden seas, mountains rose like jagged teeth against the sky, and rivers carved hidden valleys where few dared to tread. It was along these routes, on ancient paths trodden by merchants, pilgrims, and armies, that the Templars dispatched their caravans at dawn, carrying with them far more than mere supplies. They transported secrets, valuable relics, and fragments of knowledge capable of altering the balance of power in kingdoms far from the Mediterranean. The early morning sun painted the sands with a rosy gold light as mounted knights and humble pack animals moved in a carefully orchestrated formation. Each caravan was planned with exceptional precision. Scouts rode ahead, Messengers maintained constant communication, and guards flanked the precious relics, transported in reinforced chests, bound with cloth and iron. Among these valuable cargoes were manuscripts, coded with information about the whereabouts of sacred objects, fragments of holy relics, and sometimes, it was whispered, parts of the Spear of Destiny itself. The journey was fraught with danger. Bandits attacked without warning. Desert winds could dry the water from the veins of men and animals, and mountains demanded skills that few possessed. Yet for the Templars, danger was a constant companion, and secrecy a reliable shield. Every traveler understood that they were not merely transporting goods. They were safeguarding destiny itself. Every fragment, every map, every cautious step was a thread in a complex tapestry woven from centuries of faith, ambition, and fear. Along the caravan route, monasteries offered safe haven, markets provided cover, and merchants created a network of tacit communication. The journey itself transformed into a living code, a complex dance of movement and concealment. To outside observers, the caravans might have seemed ordinary, transporting grain or silks. But for those who knew the signals, every lamp, every mark on a tent, the arrival time of every messenger conveyed a message that could change the course of the spear's quest. In arid oases, the knights found refuge at wells, where the polished steel of their armor caught the first rays of the rising sun. They knelt in reverent prayer, their hushed voices harmonizing with the calming murmur of water gliding over smooth stones. Sometimes, beneath the silvery moonlight, ancient manuscripts were unrolled, and selected fragments were read aloud in the night's silence. But their content was encrypted, accessible only to a narrow circle of initiates. The precious relics themselves remained hidden, untouched and silent, as if sensing the full significance and grandeur of their journey. Fragmentary information about the spear's travels spread throughout the region. A wandering merchant might casually mention to a companion that some sacred iron staff had recently passed through these lands. A remote monk might subtly hint that particles of the relic had found refuge in a distant monastery. Each such message was skillfully crafted. It not only conveyed information, but equally importantly, misled, forming a complex informational labyrinth. The purpose of this labyrinth was to reliably hide the truth, while simultaneously promoting the spread and strengthening of the relic's legend. When the celestial body reached its zenith, the caravans often had already dissolved on the hazy horizon, their silhouettes merging with the sand dunes or rocky cliffs. The inhabitants of remote settlements who happened to glimpse these caravans perceived them as utterly mundane. To them, they were merely warriors, laden animals, and dust rising behind them. However, these simple people could not have guessed that with every step of these travelers, destiny itself moved. That fragments of a weapon forged in the sacred shadow of Golgotha were silently making their way to lands far beyond the Christian world, to regions whose foundations were shaped by different cultures, deep mysticism, and ancient prophecies. It was during these prolonged journeys, leading to Persia, India, and the farthest reaches of the East, that the legend of the spear became intricately intertwined with local mythological beliefs. In bustling bazaars and silent monasteries, these rumors blended with the oral traditions of travelers, uniting the Christian relic with ancient narratives of powerful kings, great sages, and sacred blades from distant lands. The iron point of this spear, unseen by the eye, yet constantly felt in its presence, gradually acquired an aura of mystery that transcended any geographical, linguistic, or religious barriers. In the silence of the night, as the heavens above the tents were strewn with stars like a silver ocean, the Knights Templar invariably kept their vigil. Campfires burned dimly, and the shadows of figures and objects stretched in long streaks across the sandy canvas. Sacred relics rested silently beneath thick layers of fabric, under the unblinking gaze of those who had sworn to protect them with their lives and honor. Even the desert itself seemed to sense the full significance and weight of what traversed its expanses. Winds, blowing over the dunes, whispered in a language older than any empire's, carrying faint echoes of prophecies through the night. And so, with the first rays of dawn illuminating distant horizons, the caravans set off again, carrying with them not just provisions or maps, but precious fragments of history, particles of faith, and perhaps the sacred spear itself, capable of shaping the destinies of entire kingdoms. Each segment of the journey traversed was an act of dual significance. It simultaneously served preservation and careful concealment. It was a meticulously choreographed dance, where the past touched the present, and the future remained shrouded in a mist of uncertainty, awaiting those hands, whether worthy or accidental, destined to receive it. As the Knights Templar caravans ventured deeper into Persia and reached the remote regions of Asia, they found themselves in a world that was itself imbued with deep and ancient mysteries. It was a world where sacred scriptures and ancient relics held the weight of many centuries. Majestic mountains stood like silent giant guardians, rivers carved their way, gouging deep gorges into the earth, and ancient cities, like precious jewels, shone under the scorching desert sun. Here, it seemed that the very air was permeated by a dense veil of history, and the aromas of spices and incense mingled with the age-old dust rising from ancient streets. The Templars, known for their skill in preserving secrets and their subtlety in observation, pursued a dual purpose, not only to protect pilgrims, but also to tirelessly seek new knowledge. In secluded monasteries, lost among the hills and in ancient temples, swallowed by jungles or buried by sands, they found scrolls and manuscripts whose writings were utterly alien to European eyes, yet their profound meaning surprisingly resonated with their own faith. These texts spoke of divine artifacts, epic sacred battles, and powerful relics capable of shaping the destinies of entire nations. Some of the knights believed that these texts represented not merely mythological tales, but contained hidden truths, keys capable of shedding light on the entire journey of the spear across continents. In the dimly lit rooms, the knights carefully unrolled ancient papyri or delicate silk scrolls, cautiously tracing their fingers over unfamiliar symbols and mysterious marks. Local monks and scholars from these distant lands cautiously instructed them, well aware that these foreigners combined both genuine curiosity and potential threat. The Templars, for their part, skillfully encrypted parts of their own knowledge, weaving Christian legends of holy relics into the fabric of local allegories. They left messages that could only be deciphered by a trained eye. In this subtle and cautious exchange of cultural heritage, the cross symbolically met the crescent, the star intertwined with the lotus, and the story of the spear gradually wove itself into the magnificent tapestry of sacred artifacts and ancient prophecies, becoming an integral part of it. Individual scrolls contained veiled hints of a weapon of unimaginable power, described through metaphors and riddles, often intertwining mythological plots with historical facts. One ancient manuscript spoke of iron that drank the blood of heavens, resting in the depths of a temple whose stones seemed to sing, holding the memory of long-gone kings. Another source mentioned a staff piercing the mortal and touching the eternal, a phrase that made the Templars' hearts beat faster with anticipation and conjecture. Could these mysterious lines be direct references to the very spear they so diligently sought? Or were they merely allegories born of local myths and beliefs? They had no certainty, and this uncertainty actually became their steadfast ally, reliably protecting the true secret of the sacred relic. Beyond this, the Templars meticulously documented their own observations, mapping new routes, noting geographical features such as mountains and rivers, and recording their discoveries on parchment, which they then artfully concealed in false bookbindings. Some of these scrolls were left intentionally. They contained coded riddles designed to mislead potential seekers and ensure that only members of the Order or the truly worthy would continue the quest. In this complex interplay between discoveries and concealments, the legend of the spear acquired new, multifaceted layers, weaving together East and West into a single, comprehensive narrative spanning entire continents. As night enveloped the land, lights flickered on and off in the caravan camps, casting whimsical, dancing shadows on ancient scrolls and precious reliquaries. The air, permeated with coolness, mingled with the rich aroma of incense, and in the night's ears resonated whispers from distant, unknown lands. In their dreams, some saw majestic temples where iron shafts gleamed beneath golden domes. Others plunged into images of grand battles unfolding amidst ancient prophecies, where the spear itself seemed to choose its designated bearer in deep silence. This journey represented not merely a physical displacement, but also a profound spiritual quest. With each mile traveled eastward, the aura of mystery surrounding the sacred relic only deepened. In bustling eastern markets, the Templars attentively observed the work of artisans and the hustle of merchants, absorbing not only information about trade goods, but also hidden symbols and signs. A pattern woven into a rug, an intricate motif carved on a door frame, or even the strict sequence of prayers recited in a temple. All could be interpreted as indicators, milestones on the path, designed either to bring them closer to the coveted relic, or conversely, to lead them astray. They began to understand that the entire world could be perceived as an ancient manuscript, and the spear's story was inextricably intertwined with the geography, culture, and collective memory of countless peoples. By the time the caravans advanced towards the rugged Himalayas and reached the outskirts of Central Asia, the legend of the spear began to acquire a truly mythical character. Some locals spoke of a staff of heaven that faintly glowed in their dreams, foretelling the appearance of a weapon when the world was ready to receive it. Others passed down tales of distant warriors who possessed an iron shaft capable of piercing destiny itself. For the Templars, these whispers served as both a warning and an encouragement, confirming that the relic's power was recognized far beyond the Christian world, and its fate was not tied to a single kingdom or a specific culture. And so, amidst impregnable mountains, boundless deserts, and mysterious hidden monasteries, the spear's journey continued, unseen, yet possessing colossal power. Ancient scrolls recorded only its echoes, allegories masked its true essence, and knights advanced with extreme caution, realizing that each new discovery could bring both enlightenment and serious danger. In the complex interplay of East and West, faith and secrecy, history and legend, the relic was preserved, its fate closely interwoven with the silent hands of those who sought to protect it, and with the whispers of a world that carried its story across centuries and continents. However, no secret could be entirely immune to human ambition, and no relic, however sacred, could escape the shadow of betrayal. The Templars, responsible guardians of the SpearOfDestiny, bore not only a physical burden, the iron itself and scrolls bound in silk, but also the heavy weight of envy, greed, and intrigue that pursued them like a hidden predator. Across Europe and the East, rumors spread faster than the knights themselves, passed by merchants, monks, and spies eager to seize what was not rightfully theirs. Within the order, vigilance was maintained at an absolute level. Yet even the most disciplined knights were not flawless. Some craved power, imagining themselves chosen by destiny to wield the spear. Others succumbed to the temptation of bribes, alluring promises, or fear, whispering fragments of the sacred map to those lurking outside the commandery walls. In such a web, the line between loyalty and betrayal became indistinguishable, and the very air seemed thick with secrets ready to ignite at any moment. Beyond the Templar fortresses, the church and monarchs watched with careful suspicion. Rome, always wary of unchecked power, received occasional hints that the order possessed relics beyond those publicly acknowledged. Kings seeking advantage sought to curry favor with the knights, offering lands or titles in exchange for valuable knowledge. Some even attempted to infiltrate caravans, posing as pilgrims or merchants, hoping to catch a glimpse of the sacred iron shaft, believed to be capable of changing the course of entire armies. The most dangerous betrayals were subtle, almost invisible, until their consequences began to unfold. A misplaced scroll here, a forgotten mark there, could reveal paths that were meant to remain hidden. Entire military campaigns could be redirected, and lives lost or saved based on information stolen in the shadows. In some cases, local rulers in the East sought to exploit Templar movements, offering false guidance or disguising true treasures behind layers of myth. The spear's journey became not only a test of endurance, but also a test of discernment, of knowing whom to trust and when suspicion itself should guide action. In monasteries and commanderies, knights whispered among themselves, discussing visions and rumors with the utmost caution. Names were rarely spoken aloud. References were veiled in code or metaphor. The eldest knights bore a heavy burden of secrecy, aware that a single mistake could unravel centuries of their guardianship. Each night, as lamps burned low and shadows lengthened, they were haunted by the same question: could the spear survive human ambition? Even allies could betray without malice, driven instead by desperation or fear. A monk might accidentally reveal a coded passage, genuinely believing it was necessary to guide the church. A young knight might lose a scroll, unaware it contained detailed instructions to a hidden vault, and so the vigilance of the keepers became almost ritualistic, a daily reaffirmation of secure locks, a careful scrutiny of all communications, and a constant reaffirmation of their sacred oath. However, treachery did not always manifest as brute force or overt theft. Sometimes it took the form of sophisticated disinformation, artfully convincing the Knights Templar that the sacred spear rested in one place, when in fact it was somewhere else entirely. Whole strategic operations could be meticulously planned around clever illusions, and long journeys were unduly protracted by cunning deception. And it was in such moments that the presence of this relic was felt most acutely, not merely as an object of iron or wood, but as an invisible force capable of shaping destiny itself, demanding from its keepers utmost caution, inexhaustible patience, and unwavering resolve. The saga of betrayal became inextricably intertwined with the legend of the Templars. Later chroniclers detailed mysterious disappearances, sudden and inexplicable deaths, as well as enigmatic movements that defied any rational explanation. Some also noted occasional manifestations of disfavor within the order itself, suggesting that the strictest secrecy alone could not fully curb deep-seated human desires and ambitions. Yet, despite all these trials and threats, the spear remained intact, serving as a living testament to the unyielding discipline and unwavering resolve of those who swore to protect it above all else. As night fell, in cells filled with the rich scent of incense and the soft glow of melting candles, the knights knelt in solemn vigil. Outside the monastery walls, the world buzzed with ambition and treacherous intrigues, but within, a profound silence reigned, and in this sacred stillness, the spear of destiny rested, like a dormant power, aware of betrayal yet untouched by it, patiently awaiting the hand worthy to wield its mighty fate once more. Legends tell not only of relics themselves, but also of the valiant men who carried them across boundless seas, bearing in wood and iron the very essence of destiny. In the mid-13th century, an impressive fleet of ships set sail from the ports of Acre, laden with untold treasures accumulated over decades of crusades, gold, precious manuscripts, and, as whispered behind backs, fragments of the spear of destiny itself. The knights entrusted with this priceless cargo fully understood the grandeur of their responsibility. Failure in this endeavor meant more than just lost wealth. It could forever alter the destinies of entire kingdoms. The fleet silently slipped into the vast Mediterranean under a dense cloak of strictest secrecy, its sails blackened against the shimmering twilight sky. Like ghostly wings, experienced navigators charted a course through treacherous waters, constantly fearing pirates and enemy fleets who coveted these relics as much as jingling coins. However, the sea, as is known, is an extremely capricious guardian. Storms could strike suddenly, without the slightest warning. Waves crashed against the sturdy hulls of the ships, with a force like the blows of angry gods, and navigation itself became a desperate gamble, as compass needles trembled restlessly and stars, faithful guides, hid behind thick clouds. Night after night, the ships relentlessly held their course. Lanterns were extinguished, voices hushed to whispers, so as not to betray the fleet's presence. Knights tirelessly patrolled the decks, their eyes carefully scanning the horizon for anything that might threaten their precious cargo. The relics themselves, carefully wrapped and securely fastened in reinforced chests, seemed to almost hum with impatience, as if aware that their journey could be a turning point whose significance extended far beyond mortal comprehension. Then, as the fleet approached a narrow strait, an unimaginable catastrophe struck. Sudden and furious storms descended upon the ships with relentless, all-consuming power. Masts splintered like dry branches, sails tore to shreds, and raging waves swallowed vessels one after another. In the ensuing chaos, the knights fought valiantly, displaying unyielding courage. But even their bravery and strict discipline could not overcome the wrath of primal nature. Some of the ships sank without a trace, dragging their precious cargo to the bottom of the ocean. Others simply vanished, lost in powerful currents, their fate unknown. Survivors recounted the horror of what happened in hushed, trembling voices. People desperately clung to wreckage. Relics slipped from hands. Lanterns swayed like distant stars before being swallowed by impenetrable darkness. Many swore that in the heart of the raging storm, they caught a glimpse of the spear's shadows, faintly glowing underwater, as if resisting the pull of the bottomless depths. Whether this was a true miracle or merely a hallucination caused by fear and despair, no one could say. But the memory of it haunted them in nightmares for decades. The vanished fleet became a story that served as both a warning and an object of persistent obsession. Chroniclers, some of whom claimed to have witnessed the aftermath of the tragedy, recorded fragmentary accounts, distant wreckage washed ashore, empty chests found in deserted coves, and relics surfacing years later under circumstances that could not be verified. Each new narrative only deepened the mystery, lending the spear a presence that transcended its physical form, as if it were capable of disappearing at will, hiding until the world was ready to receive it, or until destiny itself called it forth again. Over time, the legend of the lost fleet spread throughout the world. Rumors of its disappearance fueled the imaginations of kings, fearless adventurers, and potential treasure hunters. Numerous maps were drawn, often with deliberate errors, indicating where ships might have sunk or where precious relics might have been buried. Some claimed to have found fragments, pieces of iron or splinters of wood. However, none of them could be reliably confirmed as the true Spear of Destiny. Its elusiveness became an integral part of its power, serving as a reminder that destiny is not something granted at whim, but something earned through arduous effort and sometimes hidden by forces beyond human comprehension. In the monasteries and commanderies of the Templars, discussions of the vanished fleet were extremely rare and always conducted with the utmost caution. What could be said publicly risked attracting attention and hands hungry for power and might. Surviving knights and scribes recorded the story only in encrypted form, ensuring that knowledge of the fleet and any relics it carried remained as much a test of faith as a historical fact. Every account, every note was imbued with both truth and disinformation, serving as a defense against the ambitions and insatiable curiosity of the outside world. Even today, traditions bring us echoes of the vanished fleet, serving as a silent testament to the perilous journey of sacred relics. The iron that once pierced Christ's side made a secret journey across the seas, enduring the fury of storms, remaining inaccessible to greed, yet intriguingly tangible. This served as irrefutable proof that some forces, both divine and earthly, cannot be fully controlled. They can only be revered. And in those rare, calm moments when the sea is tranquil and moonlight gently shimmers over the waves, one involuntarily imagines the relic resting somewhere in the depths, patiently waiting, resilient, and perhaps still sensing the approach of the hand destined to claim it. By the early 14th century, the Order of the Templars had transformed, becoming far more than mere guardians. It had evolved into a formidable power, viewed with envy and suspicion even by kings and pontiffs. Their wealth had reached unimaginable proportions, and their extensive network spanned entire continents. Moreover, their profound knowledge of relics, both genuine and legendary, was unparalleled. However, as is known, power always carries its own danger, and the Order, which had guarded the Spear of Destiny for centuries, now faced enemies, both within and outside Christendom. These individuals were gripped by the fear that no relic, however sacred, should remain beyond their complete control. Pope Clement V, yielding to the pressure of King Philip IV of France, launched a massive campaign against the Templars, designed to undermine the very foundations of the order. Accusations of heresy, blasphemy, and corruption were leveled one after another, often based on insufficient evidence, but they were more than enough to sow widespread fear in society. The knights, once sworn to protect sacred relics, now found themselves accused of betrayal. Their sacred vows were cynically twisted and used as justification for their persecution. In the dim light of fortified halls, the tension became almost palpable. Those who guarded centuries-old secrets clearly understood that not only the order itself was at risk, but possibly the spear as well. Arrests followed immediately. Commanderies were plundered, manuscripts confiscated, and knights thrown into dungeons, where interrogations ranged from sophisticated psychological pressure to brutal torture. Some succumbed and confessed, naming allies and revealing fragments of secret knowledge, while others maintained courageous silence, upholding their vows even on the brink of death. Amidst these events, the spear itself mysteriously disappeared from view. None of the chroniclers could reliably confirm its subsequent fate. Perhaps it was hidden in a labyrinth of crypts, carried away by loyal knights, or secretly transported to lands beyond the influence of the church and crown. The fall of the Templars was a meticulously planned symphony of political maneuvers. Philip IV sought to seize their immense wealth, and the papacy aimed to assert its undeniable dominion. In this chaos, rumors quickly spread that the spear had survived. Whispers spoke of knights who fled eastward, carrying fragments of the relic with them, while others, it was said, hid manuscripts detailing its whereabouts in European monasteries. The line between history and legend irrevocably blurred, and the presence of the spear became an invisible thread woven into every rumor of Templar survival. Monasteries and remote abbeys became temporary refuges. Some knights vanished into obscurity, joining other orders or adopting new identities, but always keeping in memory or possession the relic they had sworn to protect. Others secretly journeyed to distant lands, crossing seas and deserts, as they had for decades, ensuring that the Spear of Destiny would never fall into unworthy hands. Every act of concealment only reinforced the legend. The relic seemed too powerful to be widely known, too dangerous to be revealed, yet too potent to be forgotten. The Church and monarchy celebrated the suppression of the Templars, unaware that the order's true influence continued to exist in hidden corners of the world. Crypts beneath abandoned commanderies, coded manuscripts in European libraries, and remote monasteries in the East served as silent witnesses. In each of them, the legacy of guardianship was preserved, proof that faith and secrecy could withstand even the most aggressive attempts at eradication. Even public accounts of betrayal and executions contained subtle hints that the spear had survived. Chroniclers mentioned visions, miraculous escapes, and relics mysteriously appearing in remote regions. Whether these stories were true or fictional, They undoubtedly ensured that the idea of the spear remained alive in people's imaginations, transforming into an enduring force, shaping stories, ambitions, and dreams long after the knights themselves had vanished into oblivion. At night, in silent halls where candles flickered and stone absorbed the weight of history, the Templar legacy lived on. Secrets were whispered through the walls, manuscripts concealed priceless knowledge, and the spear, whether material iron, myth, or both, remained inaccessible. Its journey continued, protected not by armies, but by vows, hidden paths, and an unwavering faith that transcended all persecution. And so, the fall of the Templars marked not the end of the spear, but the beginning of a new chapter in its history. Its guardians became shadows, lost in the annals of history. Its presence became a legend that spread across Europe, the Middle East, and far beyond, awaiting the hand capable of unraveling the centuries-old mystery and fulfilling its silent, enduring promise. After the Templar trials, the world seemed to turn a page. Publicly, the order was disbanded, its wealth confiscated, and its knights imprisoned or executed. However, shadows often tell a different story than history books, and it was in these shadows that the Spear of Destiny endured. It was rumored that the mysterious ancient weapon had been secretly moved to hidden crypts located deep beneath European monasteries. Others whispered that loyal knights had transported it far to the east, concealing it in places inaccessible to any monarch, pontiff, or conqueror. The preservation of these deep secrets was carried out with surgical precision. Ancient manuscripts were meticulously copied, notes were subjected to complex re-encoding, and mystical symbols were carved into walls and floors, discernible only to those initiated into their secret language. Each such alteration was deliberate, serving simultaneously as a tool of protection and a means of disinformation. A single oversight could have revealed the location of the sacred spear to those whose motives were driven not by reverence, but by greed. Thus, guarding the relic became a fragile balance between careful concealment and careful preservation. In silent European towns, where time flowed unhurriedly, travelers passed on stories of cloaked figures gliding in the moonlight, and of mysterious cargoes that moved silently from one monastery to another. Some even swore they caught glimpses of fragments of the relic, skillfully disguised and hidden in plain sight. For example, an iron shaft indistinguishable from ordinary ceremonial tools, or fragments of a map intricately woven into the binding of an old psalter. To those not initiated into the secrets, these objects seemed utterly mundane and unremarkable. However, for the chosen few, possessing the key to understanding, they were integral parts of a grand puzzle spanning continents and many centuries. Even within the church hierarchy itself, knowledge of the relic was meticulously segmented and distributed. Cardinals, monks, and skilled scribes possessed only the amount of information absolutely necessary to maintain the general illusion of ignorance. Each was bound by an unbreakable oath of secrecy, whose roots extended deep into the centuries, making it older than many existing kingdoms. The very process of concealment became a sacred act, a ritual accompanied by procedures revered as holy as prayer. Keys to the secrets were entrusted only to those deemed worthy. Codes were passed exclusively by word of mouth, and the true meaning of each object was reinforced not by coercion or force, but by sincere and unwavering devotion. former associates and allies of the Templar Order, scattered across the vast expanses of Europe and Asia, became unspoken guardians of this great secret. Thus, a monk in distant Constantinople might guard an ancient manuscript containing a subtle hint of a hidden vault located somewhere in France. And a retired knight in Sicily might hold a fragment of the relic itself, without knowing the full extent of its history. These men and women, filled with quiet but deep determination, carried out their duties, well aware that every object, every scroll, every coded note was an integral part of a much larger and older heritage. As the veil of secrecy thickened, legends multiplied and strengthened in parallel. Inhabitants of remote villages whispered of mysterious iron that emitted a faint glow under moonlight, and of enigmatic figures appearing to them in dreams, holding staffs of unimaginable power. These stories, like the wind, crossed national borders, mingling with ancient oral traditions of distant lands. In some regions, local sages and healers skillfully wove individual fragments of Templar knowledge into their own mystical systems, thereby creating a complex tapestry where Christian relics surprisingly intertwined with Eastern prophecies. The relic itself, the spear, transformed not merely into a material object, but into a powerful symbol, a focal point of destiny, whose influence extended far beyond simple iron and wood. Its invisible presence was felt in every cautious movement of its keepers, in their whispered prayers, and in the meticulous preservation of sacred knowledge. Both knights and monks unanimously understood that they were guarding not just an ancient weapon, but an entire history, a colossal power, and a huge responsibility that originated from the time of Golgotha itself. Night after night, in hidden chambers and silent corridors, the keepers tirelessly checked their precious charges. The flickering candlelight danced on the rough stone walls, illuminating enigmatic marks, obscure keys, and carefully bound scrolls, each holding a part of the great mystery. Their every movement was deliberate, every decision weighed with a deep understanding that even centuries of effort to maintain secrecy could be shattered in an instant by a single act of carelessness or betrayal. Thus, for centuries following the collapse of the mighty Templar Order, the spear continued its hidden existence, not as a war trophy, but as a living, breathing mystery. Its incredible power was preserved not for public display, but in deep shadow, sustained by unwavering devotion, strictest discipline, and an unbroken chain of guardians who perfectly understood that the world was not yet ready to receive this relic. In the silence of the night, when a gentle wind caressed ancient stone walls, and it seemed that the whole world was in deep sleep, the relic remained there, patient, eternal, awaiting that fateful moment when history and predestination would finally converge. As the Spear of Destiny continued its invisible journey, whispers of its mysterious existence gradually spread far beyond European lands. In the vast East, among majestic cities, secluded mountain monasteries, and impregnable desert fortresses, legends of a sacred iron staff began to emerge and spread. These traditions often intricately intertwined with local prophecies and beliefs. Scholars and profound mystics spoke of this weapon as an object capable of piercing not only physical flesh, but also the very delicate fabric of destiny, a relic whose power transcended cultural and religious barriers, yet remained shrouded in the deepest mystery. Templar envoys, undertaking long journeys to the east, often encountered these astonishing stories, and their natural curiosity was always tempered by their inherent caution. In distant Persia, they were told of a staff of the heavens that monks contemplated in their dreams during nightly meditations. In India, Brahmin sages subtly hinted at the existence of a divine spear capable of choosing its wielder independently and appearing to the world only in moments when it balanced on the fragile edge of destiny. And although the language and symbolism of these traditions differed, the internal resonance was unmistakable. It was the same incomprehensible force that once whispered in ancient Antioch, guided trade caravans, and managed to survive the fall of the mighty Templar order. The guardians of the spear perfectly understood the true meaning of these ancient prophecies. For them, they were not merely folklore, but an integral part of a complex veil designed to protect the sacred relic. Stories of the staff were deliberately exaggerated and spread in such a way as to mislead those who were unworthy, while simultaneously leaving a subtle, barely perceptible trail for the chosen few capable of grasping the truth. Maps, skillfully hidden in ancient manuscripts, symbols coded in sacred texts, and allegories embedded in rituals, all served as subtle guidance for those with enough discernment to perceive it. In secluded monastic abodes, perched high in mountain ranges, the Knights Templar delved into the meaning of ancient prophecies, conversing with local sages and scholars. Their dialogues were often couched in enigmatic metaphors and allegories, adding a mystical hue to every word. One night, under the cloak of darkness, one of the monks recounted a striking vision. He saw a spear whose blade shimmered with the first, hesitant rays of the rising sun. The wielder of this sacred artifact was not a lord or king, but a mysterious figure, shrouded in impenetrable shadow, whose mere appearance seemed capable of turning the tide of history and determining the destinies of entire nations. The Templars, listening intently, exchanged knowing glances, their nods expressing deep, solemn understanding. They grasped the essence of the message. It called for boundless patience, strictest secrecy, and unceasing vigilance. The sacred spear was to appear to the world only when humanity was ready for it, when the true time came, and worthy hands were prepared to receive it. However, even as these difficult and long journeys continued, the ominous shadow of betrayal relentlessly loomed over the Templars' mission. Local rulers, drawn by rumors of unprecedented power, sometimes tried to seize the mysterious relic for themselves, skillfully offering the knights ostentatious hospitality or lucrative trade deals in exchange for secret knowledge. Others, more sophisticated, tried to camouflage their true motives under the guise of diplomatic negotiations or even spiritual guidance, seeking to penetrate the order's secrets. But the Templars, trained by years of harsh discipline and refined discernment, maneuvered through these dangerous encounters with extreme caution, well aware that the slightest mistake, one wrong step, could nullify and destroy centuries of effort to preserve and protect the priceless artifact. As nightfall descended, enveloping the world in darkness, those who had ever glimpsed the sacred spear or merely heard of its incredible power often witnessed visions, both literal and deeply metaphorical. For example, a humble light flickering in a desert camp might suddenly appear to travelers as a guiding star, illuminating their path forward. And a dream experienced by one of the knights, where iron pierces stone, could be interpreted as a clear indication of the next caravan's route. Every sign, even the most subtle and barely perceptible, was studied with reverent awe and profound respect, as if the relic itself, possessing its own will, communicated with them, transmitting its messages through dense layers of ancient legends, mystical prophecies, and carefully coded instructions. Thus, the legend of the sacred spear became firmly and inextricably linked with the mystical, secret-filled landscape of the East. It entered the very fabric of local folklore, skillfully intertwining with narratives of great kings, wise rulers, and valiant warriors whose deeds shaped the history of these lands. Never fully revealing all its secrets, it nevertheless maintained an invisible aura around itself, a power that could not be shaken by cultural differences, linguistic barriers, or even religious beliefs. In every whispered tale passed from mouth to mouth, in every enigmatic, symbol-laden manuscript, and in every cautious observation, the spear's presence was preserved, felt as a silent but pervasive force capable of transcending continental and epochal boundaries, permeating generations. The role assigned to the Knights Templar was surprisingly both simple and truly grand. Their task was to guard the relic, carefully conceal it from prying eyes, and meticulously interpret all the subtle signs that indicated its further path. By doing so, they ensured that the Spear of Destiny remained untouched, and its powerful force would be safely preserved beyond the reach of human greed, reckless ambition, or folly. To the wider world, it remained merely a part of myth, a beautiful legend. But those who swore to protect it deeply understood the true nature of this power. Destiny itself seemed to move silently in the shadows, and the spear, patient and eternal, awaited its hour, the moment when it would once again appear to the world. In the most remote monasteries of Central Asia, skillfully hidden among mist-shrouded mountain peaks and tranquil, serene valleys, manuscripts were preserved, untouched for decades, and sometimes for entire centuries. Templars and local monks worked side by side, bending over parchments in the flickering candlelight, meticulously copying texts and thus preserving sacred knowledge, clothed in symbols, complex codes, and multi-layered allegories. Among these priceless scrolls were records recounting the Spear of Destiny, its path carefully veiled by numerous layers of metaphors and skillful disinformation. It was a story created with the sole purpose of surviving through the ages, without revealing its profound secrets to those who were unworthy. The mist that swirled and rolled through the valleys sometimes seemed almost animate, a living entity silently wrapping itself around massive stone walls, slipping under heavy doors, and enveloping monastic courtyards in a subdued, almost ethereal silence. In this gentle, mystery-shrouded obscurity, scribes moved with astonishing precision and focus, their quills rhythmically scratching on parchment, making a sound like the faint whisper of wind wandering over mountain peaks. Every stroke of ink they applied carried the burden and legacy of centuries of careful guardianship. Every symbol was created with special intent, deliberately designed to simultaneously conceal and, only for the initiated, reveal profound truths. Some of the manuscripts were skillfully written in local dialects, while others were in Latin, Arabic, or Hebrew, demonstrating the breadth of geographical and cultural reach. Many of these ancient scrolls contained intricate diagrams, strikingly reminiscent of celestial constellations, as well as maps folded into impossible, paradoxical geometries and complex riddles that skillfully mixed excerpts from Holy Scripture with astrological predictions. The Knights Templar studied these multifaceted texts with the utmost care and deepest attention, comparing their allegories with their own extensive knowledge. Drawn from the heritage of Europe and the Holy Land, they tirelessly searched for hidden patterns and keys that might indicate the spear's current location or outline the next, decisive step in its long and mysterious journey. From time to time, accidental travelers, having lost their way, stumbled upon these secluded monasteries, completely unaware of the sacred and colossal responsibility carefully preserved within their ancient walls. A lost merchant might only see ordinary ink and old parchment, while a curious student might notice only strange, incomprehensible symbols skillfully engraved on the floor tiles. To the uninitiated, these artifacts were no more than curiosities, quaint manifestations of an alien culture, but to the true guardians they were lifelines, vital channels of communication, piercing time and space, invisibly guiding the faithful in the shadows towards a destiny inextricably intertwined with that of the spear itself. However, even in this deep isolation and the dense fog enveloping the monasteries, threats did not disappear, but merely took on new forms. Rival powers, possessing their own intelligence networks, began to sense the presence of the remnants of the Templar order, methodically tracking the faintest traces of knights who had managed to escape the brutal purges in Europe. Letters intercepted in distant eastern markets, fragmented accounts of travelers, and even misinterpreted maps could, it seemed, at any moment reveal the location of the priceless relic, surrendering it to the power of greed and reckless ambition. It was for this compelling reason that every manuscript was meticulously protected with multi-layered false trails, complex symbolic disinformation, and skillfully embedded codes that only the most disciplined and deeply learned minds could decipher. The knights themselves, residing in these remote monasteries, seemed to possess their own peculiar magic. Flickering candles cast dancing shadows, illuminating walls adorned with images of saints, valiant warriors, and symbols so complex that their casual interpretation was simply impossible. Outside, the mists thickened, slowly rolling down the mountain slopes, like a living, breathing memory of ancient times. Inside, in the dim light, monks and knights quietly whispered, discussing seen visions, important observations, and detailed instructions for future generations of guardians. Even sleep itself was a carefully calculated ritual, in which dreams were meticulously recorded and interpreted as the subtlest messages, a special language that could be read and understood only by those whose consciousness was deeply attuned to the vibrations of the sacred spear. Thanks to ancient manuscripts, once carefully preserved, the sense of the SpearOfDestiny's presence became almost imperceptible. This powerful force, capable of guiding fateful decisions, instilling prudence, and steadily shaping the course of world history, never fully revealed itself, remaining in the shadows. Each intricately crafted flourish on parchment, each mysteriously coded line served as a constant reminder that true power lies not merely in possession, but in deep patience, comprehensive understanding, and strictest secrecy. The impact of this sacred relic was surprisingly subtle, yet invariably persistent. It subtly influenced the destinies of entire nations, without direct contact, always remaining somewhere near, yet practically invisible. Thus, amidst the mist-shrouded mountain peaks and hidden valleys, devoted guardians tirelessly protected what could not be taken by force, recorded what they dared not speak aloud, and moved in deep silence like shadows, through the echoes of past centuries. The mystical spear itself rested somewhere within unseen confines, its exact location remaining a secret. Its legend, full of riddles and omens, was preserved in cleverly coded texts and in the silent but unceasing vigilance of the few who deeply understood. True history is often made not on battlefields or in loud proclamations, but in secluded shadows and in ink-written pages, in the barely perceptible rhythm of breath, and in the careful, measured movement of a pen. Deep beneath age-old monastery walls, within the depths of long-forgotten castles, and even under humble, inconspicuous chapels, hidden crypts lay for centuries, safeguarding untold treasures. Their entrances were so skillfully masked in the play of shadows and beneath unassuming stone slabs that they remained invisible to the uninitiated. These crypts were not just ordinary storage places, they were sacred sanctuaries, specifically designed to preserve what the outside world was not yet ready for. It was among these precious relics that the Spear of Destiny might have rested, its iron point silently holding its secrets, and its unseen presence simultaneously inspiring deep awe and reverent veneration. Each entrance to these hidden chambers was a masterpiece of camouflage. Here, a cleverly constructed false floor. There, an expertly carved niche in the wall. And elsewhere, stone so perfectly fitted that even the most discerning eye would glide past without noticing its presence. Inside these hideaways, the air always remained cool, dense, saturated with the aromas of old wood and smoldering candle wax, mixed with a barely perceptible faint tang of iron. Numerous relics, ancient manuscripts, and mysterious coded objects were arranged with extreme precision and care, as if the very order of their placement possessed a magical power capable of safeguarding their sacred meaning. Each of these hidden crypts had its vigilant guardian. It could be a pious monk, a valiant knight, or sometimes both, bound by an unbreakable oath of secrecy and trained in strict rituals of vigilance passed down through generations. Access to these sacred refuges was extremely limited and strictly regulated. Only those deemed truly worthy, who were initiated into the Order's secret codes, could unerringly navigate among the complex locks, hidden keys, and intricate labyrinthine corridors specifically designed to deter and confuse any intruder. Some crypts required the combined knowledge of several individuals located in different parts of the world to be opened. Others required the performance of subtle, almost imperceptible gestures, the whispering of special phrases, or even the precise alignment of stars at specific, predestined moments. Each such measure served not merely as an obstacle, but as a serious test, ensuring that the Spear of Destiny and all the sacred knowledge associated with it remained securely hidden from unworthy hands. The crypts themselves struck with their silent but undeniable grandeur. Flickering candle flames cast whimsical shadows on the rough stone walls, adorned with barely discernible inscriptions, some of them perfectly legible, others remaining a deep mystery. Ancient scrolls and massive folios rested on darkened wooden shelves, while particularly valuable relics were carefully laid on soft velvet or hidden in iron-bound chests. If the Spear of Destiny was in this place, it invariably lay, carefully wrapped in thick cloth, its iron shaft seemingly absorbing the dim light, waiting in patient silence for that single moment when the right hand would come to claim it. The air in these chambers seemed charged with a certain anticipation, an invisible presence that could be felt but not seen. The guardians of these treasures maintained continuous and unflagging vigilance. Nights passed in silent vigil, their steps measured and cautious, their breathing barely audible. Some of them spoke of dreams in which the spear itself seemed to appear to them, guiding and giving subtle indications regarding impending danger or the need for protection. Others claimed to feel subtle changes in the very atmosphere of the crypt, hearing whispers in the air that seemed to carry a message, discernible only to those who were particularly attuned and receptive. It seemed as if the relic itself possessed its own consciousness, subtly and quietly influencing those who had sworn to diligently care for it. Despite all the careful and numerous precautions, threats to these sanctuaries persisted relentlessly. Greedy treasure hunters, ambitious nobles, and even some members of the clergy actively sought ways to access these hidden crypts, drawn by alluring legends and spreading rumors of untold riches. Some infiltrated monasteries under various pretexts, hoping to catch a glimpse of the iron point itself, shimmering through thick cloth. Others did not shy away from using bribery, crude intimidation, or even betrayal. However, despite everything, the crypts endured, their sacred secrets reliably hidden under layers of disinformation and carefully protected by the unceasing vigilance of generations of disciplined guardians. Gradually, legends of these deeply hidden vaults spread far beyond their regions, transforming into mysterious whispers of miraculous and powerful artifacts that were rumored to suddenly appear in the most remote lands. Some of the crypts were intentionally relocated, their structure dismantled brick by brick and reassembled in entirely new, even more secluded places, leaving behind only faint hints in the margins of ancient manuscripts or in cleverly coded diagrams. Others remained completely untouched for many centuries, their guardianship passed from hand to hand, always maintaining a subtle yet vital balance between reliable protection and complete concealment. In the depths of these hidden crypts, the Spear of Destiny existed not merely as a material object, but as a living and breathing testament to unwavering faith, strictest secrecy, and the carefully planned orchestration of history itself. Its invisible presence simultaneously inspired deep tranquility and bone-chilling terror, serving as a symbol of supreme and incomprehensible power, yet carefully preserved in complete silence, remaining invisible to the greedy eyes of ambitious individuals, awaiting that single moment when destiny itself would decide to awaken it to new life. And so, under the cloak of the quiet world of monastic life and unyielding stone, this legendary spear endured, patiently witnessing the passage of countless centuries, hidden from prying eyes, yet deeply and invisibly present, awaiting the day when the world would be ready to meet it again. Even after long centuries, the echoes of the great Crusades continued to reverberate across the boundless expanses of Europe and the mysterious Middle East, leaving an indelible mark in the form of memories, legends, and numerous hidden relics. The Spear of Destiny, once carried across blood-soaked battlefields, filled with boundless devotion, remained inextricably linked to these echoes. Its complex path was marked by the movements of knights, the march of entire armies, and the whispers of secret instructions, skillfully coded in ancient manuscripts. And although the wars themselves had long ended, their profound and far-reaching consequences continued to persist, like a barely discernible yet persistent shadow. Ancient pilgrimage routes, once serving as arenas for the movement of military contingents and religious figures, now witnessed the passage of trade caravans, curious travelers, and silent monks, unconsciously treading the same paths where Knights Templar once traveled, secretly transporting their sacred cargo. Along these roads, like invisible streams, trickled fragments of ancient traditions, shimmering echoes of mysterious iron hidden in deep crypts, tales of valiant knights who vanished into eastern lands, carrying priceless relics with them, and vague images of a staff credited with the power to change the destinies of entire nations. Such echoes were barely perceptible, yet surprisingly persistent. They served as a silent reminder that destiny often manifests subtly in the barely discernible actions of those who preserve memory and guard its essence. The true spear in question had transformed into something more than just an artifact. It had become a powerful symbol, a guiding beacon, and a formidable warning all at once. Chroniclers, like invisible guardians, recorded its presence in the margins of ancient manuscripts, sometimes concealing it under the guise of elegant allegory, at other times merely hinting at its existence through profound metaphor. In one exquisitely illuminated folio, among a multitude of images, a knight's spear stood out with its extraordinary radiance, seemingly pointing the viewer to a hidden route, traversing a miniature map from Acre to unknown eastern lands. To those without secret knowledge, these images appeared to be no more than decorative elements. However, for the initiated, possessing the key to understanding, they served as invisible threads that connected the past with the future, bridging Europe and the East in a silent saga of eternal guardianship. The echoes of these ancient tales were not confined to the European continent. They resonated far beyond its borders. In remote regions, once touched by the Crusades, narratives of mysterious iron staffs and other sacred weapons were carefully passed down in local folklore from generation to generation. Some traditions vividly depicted the relic appearing in mystical visions, often to warn of danger, grant protection, or test the worthy. Within the walls of monasteries located along bustling trade routes, Templar envoys repeatedly heard such stories, which served as confirmation that the legend of the spear had transcended geographical and cultural barriers, becoming part of a universal myth, skillfully intertwining Christian, Islamic, and various Eastern traditions. These echoes of the past did not remain merely inactive memories. On the contrary, they actively shaped people's actions and decisions. Knights following ancient paths discovered carefully hidden keys, consciously left by their predecessors. These could be coded symbols carved in stone, subtle architectural features, or mysterious inscriptions concealed in sacred texts. Each such sign served as a reminder that the mission of guarding the spear required exceptional vigilance and deep discernment. A wrong interpretation could lead to misguidance, but close and attentive observation always revealed the next stage of this grand journey, which by then already spanned entire continents. Even mighty kingdoms and great emperors could not escape the influence emanating from the legacy of the Crusades. Political intrigues, territorial disputes, and secret alliances were often built around rumors of sacred relics that invisibly moved behind the scenes of grand politics. Many ambitious rulers and influential figures sought to intercept control over these information flows and perhaps over the artifacts themselves, sincerely believing that possession of the spear would grant them divine favor or undeniable power. However, the relentless passage of time and the art of concealment ensured that only the chosen few, trained in the subtleties of secrecy, could truly comprehend its genuine presence and significance. In the silence of the night, as the wind swept along deserted pilgrimage routes, it seemed to carry whispers of long-past battles, echoes of sacred vows, and memories of knights who vanished into the mists of history, taking their precious cargo with them. The faint sounds of clashing steel, silent prayers, and uttered commands seemed to intertwine with the reality flowing around. They served as a reminder to everyone willing to listen that history is not merely etched on book pages, but lives in the incessant movement of memory, in undying legends, and in eternal vigilance. Thus, the powerful resonance of the Crusades continued to exist, not only in ancient chronicles and among majestic ruins, but also in the hidden, invisible life of the Spear of Destiny. This artifact remained a silent, yet omniscient witness to grand ambitions, unparalleled courage, and tragic failures of individuals and entire nations. It was guarded by those who deeply understood that some relics must remain in deep secrecy, for their influence, though invisible, is exceedingly profound, awaiting that cherished moment when destiny itself would once again call them to action. Across the vast expanses of Europe and Asia, from western shores to eastern lands, rulers in their secret chambers whispered of hidden treasures, cherished relics, and invisible forces capable of changing the world. Among these powerful figures were emperors and monarchs who claimed to possess knowledge of objects capable of overturning the destinies of entire kingdoms. Their keen interest in the Spear of Destiny was skillfully masked beneath layers of diplomatic stratagem and cunning maneuvers. The spear, which had survived the centuries-long guardianship of the Templar Order and its subsequent dissolution, now began to attract gazes from the highest thrones, drawing the attention of those who deeply understood its colossal symbolic and strategic weight. Traditions claim that one such emperor, seated in a majestic hall adorned with gilded columns and shadow-draped frescoes, secretly summoned his closest advisors to discuss the delicate possibility of ensuring the spear's continued preservation. Ancient maps were spread across tables, intercepted letters were meticulously scrutinized, and coded messages were cross-referenced with chronicle texts preserved in deep crypts, whose locations were known only to a select few. The discussion was conducted with extraordinary care and utmost caution. Even kings and emperors themselves acknowledged that the true power of this artifact lay not only in its physical existence, but equally in the strength of the legend surrounding it. Mishandling information about it could lead to unpredictable chaos or even something far more dreadful. The Emperor's agents operated silently, relentlessly moving along the remnants of ancient trade routes and forgotten pilgrimage paths. They followed the invisible threads left by the Knights Templar, who had once journeyed eastward. Along their way, they encountered ancient monasteries, stopped at trade caravans, and studied enigmatic manuscripts, carefully comparing each found clue with existing prophecies and circulating rumors. Some of these trails, alas, led to false objectives. Others, however, hinted at the existence of hidden crypts located in the most remote and inaccessible corners of the vast empire. Each new discovery only reinforced the conviction that the legend of the spear possessed as much power and reality as the artifact itself, being a living symbol of power and destiny, inextricably intertwined. At the imperial court, the fascination with this enigmatic relic was dual, combining both deep spiritual significance and calculated strategic value. Spiritual mentors and theologians presented the spear as a truly divine instrument, capable of bestowing heavenly blessing or confirming the legitimacy of those sovereigns who wielded it with sincere righteousness. On the other hand, experienced military strategists saw in it a powerful psychological weapon, a symbol whose mere possession could inspire entire armies and instill unwavering terror in the hearts of adversaries. But despite all their persistent searches and colossal efforts, this legendary object remained utterly elusive. Its exact location had been carefully hidden for many centuries, thanks to the sophisticated cunning of the Templars and the selfless, patient guardianship of monastic orders and valiant knights. Even within the closest imperial circle, strict secrecy was considered paramount. Information about the relic was meticulously fragmented, distributed among a select few, so that no one possessed the full picture. Rumors, often false and misleading, were deliberately spread to distract potential rivals and enemies. Special couriers transported coded messages, cleverly disguised as routine correspondence, while other messengers, like ghosts, made their journeys under the cloak of night, gliding shadows among shadows to deliver scattered fragments of information to those sworn to interpret them. The emperor himself deeply understood that even the mere suggestion of the spear's existence could become a powerful weapon. The perception of its presence, its potential power, could prove to be no less, and perhaps even more, dangerous than the physical possession of the sacred relic itself. Traditions bring us images of those moments when the emperor, immersed in deep thought, remained alone in the silence of his private chambers. He carefully studied an ancient map, covered with enigmatic symbols whose meaning was accessible only to him and his most trusted advisors. His thoughts revolved around the question of what secret paths could lead to the coveted spear, what ancient crypts concealed fragments of its centuries-old history in their depths, and what loyal guardians continued to stand guard over the continuous chain of secrecy passed down from generation to generation. On other nights, his sleep was troubled by visions of the iron shaft itself, which seemed to emit a faint, mystical glow, a power patiently awaiting its hour, awaiting the single hand capable of wielding it to control destiny itself. Thus, in the majestic palaces and impregnable fortresses, spread across all borders and vast territories of empires, this age-old pursuit of the coveted spear tirelessly continued. Nevertheless, despite the untold riches, colossal power, and boundless influence of emperors, this priceless relic stubbornly remained out of reach. It continued to be preserved in deep crypts, secluded monasteries, and hidden corridors of history, guarded by unceasing vigilance, boundless patience, and the unwavering devotion of its keepers. The emperor's secret, like the spear itself, became an integral part of the silent, invisible architecture of destiny itself, serving as a constant reminder that some powerful forces shape the world subtly, quietly, and imperceptibly, awaiting only the opportune moment to manifest with consequences capable of surpassing any human imagination. Centuries passed, but the spear of destiny stubbornly refused to vanish into oblivion, maintaining its place in human consciousness. And although its material presence remained hidden from the world's eyes, the legend itself not only lived, but continuously grew, intricately intertwined with the chronicles of nations, the secret memories of hidden orders, and the boundless imagination of those who dared to dream of something beyond ordinary reality. In bustling cities, secluded monasteries, and remote corners of vast empires, stories were whispered of an iron staff believed to possess truly divine power. A relic that had survived the fall of great empires, the collapse of mighty orders, and the relentless, merciless passage of time itself. The legacy of the Templars, despite brutal purges and persecutions, continued to live and be preserved in deeply conspiratorial circles. The Guardians themselves, who managed to survive these tragic events and carry valuable fragments of information across boundless deserts and raging oceans, gradually transformed into living myths. Narratives arose and were passed down by word of mouth about knights who disappeared without a trace in the distant east, about monks secretly safeguarding ancient manuscripts in misty mountain refuges, and about incredible journeys where destiny itself seemed to guide those brave enough to follow its calls. In these stories, the spear ceased to be merely an ordinary weapon. It transformed into something far greater. An idea, a powerful symbol of power, unwavering faith, and unceasing, continuous vigilance. Local traditions and beliefs gradually merged with ancient European tales, forming a single, multifaceted narrative. In Asian countries, scholars and mystics discussed the future appearance of a divine weapon, destined to emerge when the world stood on the brink between universal chaos and desired order. At the same time, in Europe, secret societies, existing in deep conspiracy, whispered stories of the Templar relic, hidden yet possessing incredible power, capable of influencing the destinies of kings and emperors. Across various continents, this narrative became increasingly rich and complex, superimposing ancient prophecies onto current reality, skillfully intertwining myth with the truth that had been carefully guarded for many centuries by its keepers. Even during periods of relative calm and peace, this legend continued to significantly influence crucial decisions. Scholars diligently interpreted coded manuscripts, rulers pursued only vague, fragmented rumors, and ambitious seekers of power followed secret paths that had been so carefully hidden by the Templars. The spear's influence was felt subtly, almost imperceptibly, yet it was pervasive. Its very history shaped human ambitions, inspired countless quests, and guided fateful choices, never once revealing itself in physical form. Its essence had long since transcended mere iron and blood, becoming the true embodiment of destiny itself. Night after night, in the most hidden corners of the globe, tireless guardians continued their vigilant watch. The spear, carefully wrapped and deeply concealed, rested in complete silence. Yet, it seemed to pulse beneath the colossal weight of its centuries-old history. Its invisible presence was simultaneously silent and authoritative, serving as a constant reminder that true power, when hidden and preserved with unwavering devotion, carries a force that significantly surpasses the might of entire armies or the glitter of untold gold treasures. Even the most fleeting glimpse in a candlelit crypt, a barely discernible trace in a coded manuscript, or a whispered prophecy served as confirmation for believers that this sacred relic truly exists. Numerous legends tirelessly recounted its possible return to the world. Some claimed it would appear only to a worthy person in a moment of greatest danger, when humanity stood on the brink of an abyss. Others whispered that the spear itself chooses the opportune time for its manifestation, revealing itself only when destiny itself urgently demands it. Across the earth, This astonishing story inspired people's hearts, evoking reverence, fear, and hope, connecting generations with an unbroken, persistent thread. The iron point, which, according to tradition, once pierced Golgotha, continued to remain hidden, patiently waiting, eternal and unchanging. And thus, the Spear of Destiny, reborn and immortalized in legends, transformed into a force that transcended the bounds of ordinary history. It became a powerful symbol of preserved faith, meticulously guarded secrecy, and destiny itself, silently moving through time, patiently awaiting the single hand that would one day return it to the world. In that inevitable moment when myth and reality converge once more, its story will endure. A silent yet incredibly powerful thread, skillfully woven into the majestic tapestry of human history. It will whisper that some sacred relics, some profound truths, and some predestined fates cannot be utterly destroyed. They can only be hidden until the world is truly ready to receive them. And now, as centuries relentlessly succeed one another, drawing closer to modernity, the Spear of Destiny has once again plunged into deep oblivion, hidden from the world's eyes. Its astonishing journey traversed boundless continents, mighty empires, and countless epochs. It was carried by valiant knights, carefully concealed by humble monks, and its secrets became the subject of hushed whispers among seasoned scholars and powerful rulers. Whether in secluded crypts, beneath massive stone slabs, behind skillfully constructed false walls, or meticulously encrypted in ancient manuscripts, it silently resides, awaiting its hour, like a mute yet deeply aware observer of the world around it. Its steel shaft seems to absorb the flickering light of melting candles and the deep shadows of those who, driven by unwavering devotion, have sworn to protect this relic. The relentless march of time has, without doubt, softened the sharp edges of human memory, blurring many historical details. However, the inextinguishable legend of it continues to shine with its former brilliance, retaining its allure. Across the vast expanses of Europe and the mysterious lands of Asia, faint echoes of its presence still resonate, clothed in the whispers of ancient traditions and tales. They can be found through diligent study of ancient manuscripts, in the architectural features of monasteries and temples, and in the cautious and deliberate actions of the few keepers who deeply understand that there are secrets whose significance surpasses the might of kings and the boundaries of entire empires. Every decision they made, every deliberately created confusion, every meticulously encrypted word, all were like threads skillfully woven into a grand tapestry, whose sole purpose was to conceal and protect that which would prove too powerful for the world if it were in plain sight. Even in the current era, an attentive observer, finely tuned to the subtle currents of hidden history, can discern faint, almost invisible traces pointing to the spear's ancient path. The venerable walls of ancient monasteries seem to whisper of the presence of iron, securely hidden beneath their massive stone foundations. In old scrolls, written in long-forgotten languages, one can find vague hints of routes that traversed impregnable mountain ranges and barren deserts, and mysterious symbols, carefully inscribed in dusty library folios, conceal the true whereabouts of artifacts possessing a power far exceeding ordinary human perception. The strict discipline of the legendary Templars, the sacred secrets of mighty emperors, and the unceasing vigilance of countless generations of guardians. All these factors ensured that the story of the Spear of Destiny was preserved not in lavish museum exhibits or on the pages of open chronicles, but in deep shadows and reverent silence. When night's darkness descends upon the earth, and the entire world plunges into deep, serene sleep, one can almost physically sense or imagine a faint glow of destiny that seems to linger in these hidden chambers. The air there feels electrified, permeated with the invisible memory of battles fought in the deepest secrecy, of long and dangerous journeys undertaken in the shadows, and of the confidential whispers exchanged by the few who grasp the truth. Some relics are far more than mere ancient artifacts. They are living, silent witnesses to unwavering faith, remarkable courage, and endless patience. Even in a state of seeming immobility, the spear exerts its invisible, quiet influence, guiding the souls of the faithful and inspiring vigilant keepers, thereby subtly shaping the course of history from the most hidden corners of the world. And yet, even after many centuries, it is impossible not to ask a deep, stirring question. Despite all the unprecedented secrecy, unceasing vigilance, and countless journeys across continents and oceans, the Spear of Destiny, is it still patiently awaiting the hand that will be truly worthy to take it? Is it buried deep beneath age-old stone, skillfully hidden in ancient manuscripts? Or does it silently rest in some long-forgotten crypt, where only the shadows know of its presence? Or perhaps destiny itself has changed, and the world is destined to at least glimpse the incredible power it was never meant to possess. In this mysterious twilight of secrets, where the threads of history and legend are inextricably intertwined, this ancient relic continues its unseen existence. It is silent, yet eternal, patient, yet powerful. Its journey has been incredibly long, its guardianship unbroken, and its true story still unfinished. The world may continue to dwell in deep ignorance of its true meaning, but the Spear of Destiny relentlessly endures, patiently awaiting that fateful moment when myth and reality finally intersect at a single point, when the very iron that once, according to tradition, pierced the heavens will once again touch our earth.